Hi, this is Carl Ackerman, host of Journeys of the Mind, and we are very lucky to have Mackenzie Feldman, who has started a nonprofit dedicated to the environment and environmental pursuits called Rewild Your Campus, which is a rather unusual name, and we will get to that in just a moment. But Mackenzie, you grew up in Hawaii and attended a very nice school, and then you went to the University of California at Berkeley. Tell us a little bit about that before we ask the formal questions.
Yes, I did go to a nice school and happened to have an amazing AP European history teacher, Dr. Ackerman. I know you were very excited when I was telling you that I was considering going to Berkeley, and I'm sure that had something to do with me eventually going there. I was recruited to play beach volleyball, and yeah, ended up getting the opportunity to go to UC Berkeley. And as I'm sure we'll talk about in this conversation, it really did change the trajectory of my life. So super excited to be talking to you, and just super special that we both share the same alma mater.
Because you were a athlete and a Division I athlete in terms of beach volleyball, you got to live in that wonderful campus, that great campus called Clark Kerr campus,
Yeah.
and with sort of the reputation of being very luxurious and the best dorm to live in. But let's begin with Berkeley because you've already mentioned how did UC Berkeley or Punahou School eventually contribute to your search for greater environmentalism?
Yeah. I think just going back even further, growing up in Hawaii, being part Native Hawaiian, you can't help but to care about the environment. I think, you know, it's just part of the culture, right? It's you just learn to protect natural resources, you learn to care about them. People say, you can't protect what you don't love. And so from an early age, just loving the environment, that definitely was formative for me as I grew up. And I remember specifically getting interested in the issue of pesticides when I was in high school. And there was a big movement. I don't know if you remember this movement, Dr. Ackerman, but there was a movement of activists that were trying to get these large agrochemical corporations off of the islands because for those of you who don't know, they do the majority of the GMO corn seed testing in Hawaii, and so they test the seed's resistance to pesticides. And because of that, they spray an immense amount of pesticides in Hawaii. Now, because of all the activism, a lot of that testing has moved elsewhere, like to Puerto Rico, but still a lot of it is done in Hawaii. And so as a result, tons of people who were living near these testing sites, especially on Kauai, some on Molokai, and Maui, people were getting sick from being exposed to these pesticides or large cancer clusters, babies being born with intestines outside of their body and other horrific health impacts. And so I learned about this and this fight that these activists, were standing up to the corporations and trying to get them to, they were trying to get GMO testing banned from Hawaii. So I learned about this when I was in high school. I wanted to be part of the movement, but I wasn't really quite sure how to plug in. And then one day, fast forward, I'm at UC Berkeley. I show up for beach volleyball practice when I'm a junior. And our coach says, if the ball rolls off the court, don't go and chase it because an herbicide had been sprayed everywhere around the court. And so, just having the knowledge that I had about the harms of pesticides and herbicides, I was really shocked to hear this information. And so was my teammate Bridget. She grew up in Illinois, kind of surrounded by industrial agriculture. So the two of us went up to our coach and we said, hey, can you put us in touch with the grounds manager? We would like to know what he was spraying and get more information. And so we had a meeting with him after practice. And he said, so yeah, he said, I'm spraying the glyphosate based herbicide called Ranger Pro. This was in 2017. So 2 years prior, in 2015, the World Health Organization had declared this herbicide, that it had declared glyphosate, the active ingredient in this herbicide, a probable carcinogen. So we were, being exposed here we are, young women, in reproductive age, with wearing these uniforms that have our skin exposed. We are being exposed to this glyphosate based herbicide. So we asked the grounds manager, can you not spray this where we're practicing? And he said, sure, I just don't have the staff to pick the weeds. And so, if you can help me pick the weeds. And so we said, great, we have 20 girls on our team. We'll pick the weeds before practice. And so that's what we did. And me and Bridget realized an important lesson that day. When you come at a problem with an offer to help and be part of that solution, you can actually make real change. We're not just pointing out a problem. We're here. We're saying we're willing to get our hands dirty. Literally, we want to be part of the solution. And so from there, we decided to take this campaign to the campaign at the time. I mean, it was just this victory on the beach volleyball court, but we took it to the rest of UC Berkeley's campus and we started to explore, where else are they spraying herbicides? Could we start a movement here, get the student government involved, get students excited about this? And so that's how it all began.
Once you graduated, and you have this great nonprofit now, how did that transition take place? Especially because you're a CEO of this nonprofit.
After the beach volleyball court, we started this movement called Herbicide Free Cal, and we got a grant to bring in an organic specialist, and he trained the grounds team at UC Berkeley on how to manage the two largest green spaces. So Memorial Glade was one of them, how to manage these spaces organically. And from there, the grounds team had the resources and the knowledge to then expand that to the rest of campus. So today, UC Berkeley is essentially all organic. And yeah, so I graduated in 2018. I had no intention of continuing with this. I just hadn't thought about it, to be completely honest. But I happened to be still in the Bay Area in the summer of 2018. And I heard about this trial of a groundskeeper named Lee Johnson who was suing Monsanto for he was a Bay Area groundskeeper spraying the same thing that we were exposed to on the beach volleyball court, Ranger Pro, and he got diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma and believed it was because of the herbicide. And so he sued Monsanto. And this was going on for weeks in the summer of 2018. So me and my mom actually were in town and I said, I really want to go to this trial. This is pretty unbelievable. This everyday person standing up to the largest agrochemical company in the world. And so I sat in on many days of the trial and was just very inspired by his story. And I was also just had such a fire inside of me because the lawyers that were defending Monsanto, it was the same lawyers that defended, big tobacco back in the day. And they're using that same playbook to just deny the science and, you know, um, just yeah, it was just pretty maddening. And I knew, all these activists that had inspired me back in Hawaii were watching this story, and the decision was gonna have ripple effects around the world. And so sitting there in the trial, I decided to write Lee Johnson, the plaintiff, a letter. So I said, hi, I started this movement at Berkeley. You're super inspiring. I'm from Hawaii. Everyone, back home is watching this, and we just want you to know that we're so inspired by what you're doing. And I left my email and I tapped the lawyer sitting in front of me and I said, hey, can you hand this to Lee? And then so I said, okay. So he handed the letter to Lee, and Lee was reading it and kind of looked back like, who the heck wrote me a letter in the middle of the trial? And so, fast forward, he ended up winning the trial. It was a $289 million lawsuit, which was ended up getting reduced to 79 million. And after he won, he said, hey, I'm going to email you. And so a few weeks later, he reached out to me and he said, hey, I want to help you with your campaign. And when I was sitting there in the trial, I decided to expand the movement from Berkeley to other campuses because it felt like, how many groundskeepers were there like Lee who are just trying to do their job, wearing all the PPE, the protective gear, taking all the precautions and still, getting diagnosed with a terminal illness. And, if I learned how I could do this at Berkeley, we could probably do this at other schools. And it felt like a responsibility, and it felt like I couldn't not spread that to other places. And at the time, students had already been emailing me saying, I heard what you did at Berkeley. Can you help me do this at my school? So we decided, well, I guess me at the time, I was kind of the only person working on this. I decided to expand it to other University of California schools. First, we ended up getting glyphosate banned from all 10 University of California schools. We brought Lee Johnson, the plaintiff, to Hawaii, and I worked with the Protect Our Keiki Coalition. And we had Lee go to 4 different islands, speak to Parks and Rec, speak to the Hawaii Department of the Board of Education. And they were so moved by his story that they decided to ban herbicides from every public school in the state of Hawaii. So that was back in 2019. And it was such a full circle moment for me because I had the connection to Lee. So I was the one that was able to convince him to come and do this whole trip, but it was organized by all the nonprofits in Hawaii that had inspired me when I was growing up. And so it was just an unbelievable kind of full circle moment. And basically I've been working on this ever since. And so at the time we called it herbicide free Cal, then we expanded to herbicide free UC, and then it became herbicide free campus. And then a couple of years ago, like 2.5 years ago now, I got in touch with this group called Rewild. And we were already thinking of changing the name because it didn't feel like what we were doing was just eliminating herbicides from schools. We were building healthy soil. We were, seeing how we can improve the biodiversity of the campus, implement more native plants, maybe edible landscapes. We were really rethinking and rebuilding how, landscapes are formed on university campuses. We talk about decolonizing aesthetics and thinking about how can we have less lawn and more wild spaces. And so I loved this group, Rewild. They're a global conservation organization. And when I met with the CEO of that organization, we decided, maybe there's a way we can merge. And so we became Rewild Your Campus and kind of folded in as a project of Rewild. And that was a few years ago. We're still like financially independent, so we do all of our own fundraising and things like that. But we have the brand of this larger conservation group, which was the Global Wildlife Conservation, and they had merged with the Leonardo DiCaprio Foundation and formed this group called Rewild. And now we are Rewild Your Campus kind of under them. So we get to use, a lot of times their network and their platform, but kind of function as our own nonprofit essentially. And when I say we, I mean, yeah, it started out as kind of me trying to start this nonprofit, but along the way, a lot of my classmates from Berkeley, women that I had been really close to, noticed what I was doing and asked if they could help. And I was eventually, once I raised money, I was able to hire some people. And so we have about around like there's 6 of us now. We have 4 full-time. Well, I guess there's 7 of us. 4 full-time and 3 part-time. And it's just been an amazing experience. I feel super lucky to get to work with some of my closest friends. We're all women, kind of women led, young women led team. And now we work with campuses all over the country.
That is very unusual, and the fact that it's woman-led and woman-populated is an additional great fact about your organization. So I understand now that you are in Texas. So how did that transition take place? And in that very special region that got a lot of press during the political campaign because it's an area that changed its politics, but it's right next to the Mexico border. So tell us a little bit about that, Mackenzie.
So I live in South Texas in the Rio Grande Valley. Yeah, really just kind of right on the border of Mexico. And I found myself there because I just finished my master's there, in sustainable agriculture and agroecology. And it was pretty random. It was, I was on a trip in Cuba on a food sovereignty tour, visiting organic farms and learning from farmers there. And on this tour with me happened to be a bunch of people from the Rio Grande Valley, including a professor named Dr. Alex Rosellis. And this was in 2016. And I just loved getting to meet him, and he had a student with him, and I loved everything that he was about and what he was teaching, and we kind of just stayed in touch. And he had said, if you're ever, this was when I was still undergrad at UC Berkeley at the time, but he had said, if you're ever looking to do a master's, you should consider coming to the Rio Grande Valley. he painted it as this, beautiful valley. I didn't realize they call it the valley, but it is flat as heck. There's definitely beautiful parts to it, but he did a good job selling it. And but I'm so happy that I moved here. But what really kind of led me to move here was I had graduated from Berkeley. I was living in San Francisco, running my nonprofit full time remotely, but just kind of feeling like I was around a lot of people who agreed with me, and this liberal bubble. And I have a real passion for sustainable agriculture and for pesticides, trying to eliminate pesticides. But I felt like if I ever wanted to do this on a larger scale one day, and not just work with colleges but really work with farmers, it would be important to understand the realities of farmers, especially large scale conventional farmers who use lots of pesticides. And so that was just something in my mind, and I felt like it was important to get out there on the actual farms one day and not just be in my bubble. And so randomly, Dr. Rosellis, who I had met in Cuba back in 2016, he called me out of the blue back in 2020, and he said, "Hey, we have this scholarship from the USDA. You would get to do some social science, conducting interviews with farmers, trying to understand how they could, why are they interested in cover cropping, this sustainable agriculture practice. I think it would be really good for you to do that." And I said, "Could I still run my nonprofit full time?" And he said, "Yeah, we'll figure out a way to make it work." So I ended up moving down to the valley in the fall of 2022 and pursued the master's for the past 2.5 years, and just finished. And it was everything that I was, that I was searching for. I got to spend a lot of time with farmers, a lot of them who don't believe in climate change, who have very different political beliefs than me, but also are very passionate about soil health, and are trying to be good stewards of the environment. And so it was really interesting, kind of like how to find common ground in that way. And they would show me their pesticide sheds and say, "I hate the fact that I have to use all these pesticides, but I feel trapped. I feel like I'm part of this system and I don't know how to get out of it." And so it gave me just a very good understanding of the reality of farmers, especially in rural areas that maybe don't have access to a lot of the newest information and resources. And I did find common ground, and I became good friends with a lot of these farmers. And so it was just an experience that I will take with me forever, in whatever, career I find myself in the future. But I love this area, and I'm still here after finishing. And yeah, it's a really unique region. It's predominantly Hispanic. It's like 90, 95, 96% Hispanic. And the politics, yeah, especially now, it's a very interesting time to be here. And I feel like I've learned a lot just from the community here. So I feel very lucky to have gotten this experience. And we're getting to work with, like, I'm working with the university here doing Rewild Your Campus, and hopefully get to work with more schools in the Rio Grande Valley on our movement.
I like that the fact that this all began by you attending a trial, and the mensch who created ThinkTech Hawaii, which this show is part of, is a lawyer, and so
Mm.
and a good lawyer at that. Or and so anyway, I'm glad it all started there. But you said something during this interview that really intrigued me, and you talked a little bit about the ethos of Hawaii and how that kind of, especially being, part Hawaiian and Ashkenazi Jew, you developed an ideology, or at least some ideas about why preserving the environment is important. I'd like you to expand on that, because that's the sort of the ideology that drove you.
And I feel like it took going away to really fully comprehend that. I think we take a lot for granted growing up in Hawaii, just how beautiful it is and how rich the culture is, and how much naturally people are aware of their surroundings. Living on an island, you're very aware of the limited resources, and you kind of know if you destroy the resources, there's nowhere else to go, there's nothing else to use, which is not the case if you're not living on an island. And so I think all of that was um just kind of part of growing up and part of the culture, whether you're Hawaiian or not. But I think um, the Hawaiian part of it is that Hawaiians were and are very good stewards of the land, thinking many generations ahead, always thinking about protecting natural resources and using them in a way that feels like there's a an an element of reciprocity, not extracting resources, but really not taking too much and really having respect for the land. And I think when I went away to college and I actually learned a lot about, indigenous stewardship of land and how indigenous people protect most of the world's biodiversity and all of these things that I was connecting back to Hawaiian culture. And I was like, wow, this is all happening in Hawaii. And I feel like I didn't even fully realize it or didn't understand all of these things about the impacts of colonization um and all of that. And so then kind of coming when I would come back from college, I feel like I had a greater understanding of the environment I was raised in, and also just uh, uh, so much gratitude for getting to grow up in Hawaii. And just in terms of food systems, Hawaii imports over 90% of our food, which is crazy thinking that, not that long ago, prior to colonization, Hawaiians we're 100% self sufficient, and we could be so much more self sufficient. We have some of the richest soils and such fertile lands, but it's a question of just how are we using those lands, and it's important to think about, because if there was ever another pandemic or a reason why we wouldn't be able to access um, our imports, we would be totally screwed. And so I think it's in everyone's best interest to think about how we can become more self-sufficient, and that could provide a lot of great jobs, in Hawaii that don't just rely on the tourism economy and things like that. And so, yeah, I think that everybody has a lot to learn from Hawaii. And there's a great movie called Island Earth, and it's about particularly the GMO pesticide issue in Hawaii. And if you're listening to this and you haven't seen it, I would highly recommend it. It's pretty amazing, and it has a couple Berkeley professors that are in the movie too. So kind of a connecting all those dots in a way.
Great connections. Now, you're the second Punahou graduate that's formed an environmental nonprofit that I know of, and the other one was Brian Schatz, currently our senator. When he came out of one of the Claremont colleges, he started Youth for Environmental Service. So you're in good company,
Mm.
Mackenzie. The next question I have for you is about, I know you're a published author and you're at such a young age, and you published with your mother a book, and you can correct me if I've got the title wrong, something like Groundbakers. Is that it?
Groundbakers, yes, I can.
So tell us about that. And is it connected to your environmental work, or is it a separate entity? But it's such a wonderful thing for you to have produced, being not that long ago in college. I couldn't have imagined publishing a book or writing a book when I was your age. So there we go. Tell us.
Yeah, so it's called Groundbakers: 60 plant-based comfort food recipes and 16 leaders changing the food system. So I wrote it with my mom, which was a super special experience, and we feature 16 people. So these are people who are leaders in the food system: farmers, teachers, activists, chefs, kind of a wide range. Yeah, it is connected. I think like a lot of these things are connected. And basically the inspiration for the book was I ended up studying food systems at UC Berkeley, and got to take this awesome class called Edible Education, and it was so awesome. I ended up taking it all 4 years of college, and the class was every week there'd be a new leader that of the food system that would come to speak, and so from that I got to just learn from a lot of amazing people, and learned about the injustices happening to farm workers, learning about soil health, learning about you know issues with like food deserts and access to fresh foods, and how that disproportionately affects low income people of color, and just kind of all these aspects of the food system that maybe you don't necessarily think about when you're eating, or when you open a cookbook, you're not thinking about how all of these issues are related to the food that ends up on your plate. And at the same time, I stopped eating meat because I learned about the how much water it takes to produce a hamburger and all these things. And I guess something I haven't mentioned yet is just the impact of my mom. And when we talk about, Hawaii instilling all these values with me, I also have to say it was my mom. I mean, she's been such an influence on my life and has been herself vegetarian since she was a kid, and just didn't raise us vegetarian, but always um she instilled in us these important values of a healthy food system, and always talked to us about she would go to the only store on the island that had organic milk because she didn't want to have the hormones and the antibiotics in the milk. And she cared a lot about the treatment of animals, and would teach me about how everything happening with factory farm animals. And the two of us together learned about this issue of pesticides when that was first happening in Hawaii and all of that. So I feel like the two of us had been on this journey together. And so in college, I was inspired to kind of move more in the direction of veganism for environment, kind of human health and like animal welfare reasons. And my mom became vegan, and so did my brother. And so my mom started experimenting with all these new plant-based recipes. And so as I was in college and she was experimenting with that, and I was getting to learn from all these amazing people, I kind of had this idea of, what if we put this together in a book, like having all these recipes that people can try, and then also sharing stories from people, because I think it was important to learn, if you want a job in food systems, you don't have to just be a farmer or be a chef. You can be a leader in food systems in so many other ways, pushing for better policies, educating children, kind of, yeah, working in the food justice angle and doing more community organizing. And so we that's what we did. And so we put this book together, and it took 6 years. It finally came out in the fall of 2022. And yeah, it's you can order it online. You can ask your local bookstore to sell it, and then we feature, yeah, so like this is an example. This is Sean Sherman. He's called the Sioux chef. He's a Sioux Indian. um and so this is about him working on revitalizing native foodways. And so yeah, it was just an awesome experience. And I hope now that I'm done with grad school, I'll have more time to promote it. So yeah.
Well, not only your mother, but I was interested the other day. I have some business sometimes with your father because we're both interested in boxing for a variety of different reasons. But instead of suggesting a restaurant like all good restaurants like Zippy's or Et al or something like this, we went to a, is it called like High Street Cafe, which is like Hawaiian food.
Oh, Highway In.
Yeah, Highway. It's Highway Inn. Very good. There you go. Highway Inn. And he sort of lives his life following some precepts that are part of his ideology, having grown up part Hawaiian in Hawaii. And I was interested. That's the restaurant that he picked. So he's walking the walk, like your mother is walking the walk. Now, Mackenzie, normally I don't do this, but because I am a friend now of your father's, I had to end this, or I'll leave you the last word, but with a story about you when you were at Punahou School in Hawaii. You competed for an opportunity to speak to all the seniors at Senior Chapel. And as you were auditioning, a woman who was a janitor came up to you and said, "Great speech." And you had said to her, "Well, if I win, come and see me." And she had said, "Well, as a janitor, I'm not generally invited to many things at Punahou." And you said, "Well, if I win, I will get you a ticket and you will come to the service." And you followed through with this. And this woman was beside herself and she watched you give your speech. So you walked the walk too, Mackenzie. And I thought that's really, sometimes we forget about people who are, working on campuses and making our campuses look so pretty. And I have to ask you actually one last question, because you mentioned about working through your nonprofit with UC Berkeley. Did it include that beautiful eucalyptus grove that is down, with the Strawberry Creek? It's on, I guess, the ocean, the bay side of the campus, but there's a huge section that's devoted to it. Almost looks like a like a forest. What is a forest? A
Yeah.
small forest. And did you work there at all, or with Strawberry Creek, or any of those great monuments on the Berkeley campus?
They pretty much don't spray anything unless they need to, but one area that they do still apply herbicides if they have to are to the eucalyptus trees because they're a fire hazard because I guess the oil with the eucalyptus. And so if they're ever trying to, I don't know, take down one of the trees for whatever reason, they do apply an herbicide to the base. So I don't know if they're doing that. I think eucalyptus grove, they keep that unless there's some issue. But the eucalyptus kind of tree thing is a whole different realm, and I think there's people who are passionate about that from both sides. So our focus really was on the lawns because I there's always going to be maybe reasons why they in emergencies they have to apply an herbicide, and I get that, but I really wanted to just make sure that in especially in areas where lots of students were congregating and laying down, that they weren't applying any herbicides. And so I think with Strawberry Creek and even Eucalyptus Grove, it's all managed organically, unless there's like something emergency that comes up. But that kind of happened either like in tandem or after kind of this transition where the grounds were trained, because once they were trained on how to do it on Memorial Glade and Faculty Glade, they were kind of taking that to other areas. And students even before me had been kind of working in the Strawberry Creek area to increase biodiversity and kind of protect that area. So I can't really take credit for that, but I know now that at least when you're talking about any area of campus, I could say with confidence that it's most likely not going to be you're most likely not going to be exposed to toxic herbicide. And if they're for whatever reason they did have to use something, they will be transparent about it. Um, but those are such beautiful areas. I took my graduation picture in the eucalyptus grove. And so yeah, and thank you for sharing that story. I forgot about that until you mentioned it, but I remember that really well. And I guess I was always there was some magnet to the workers, I guess, because now most of the people I talk to are, groundskeepers, maybe not custodial indoor workers, but are the groundskeepers. And I think one important part about our work is that we teach students how to collaborate with groundskeepers, and it's important because like you mentioned, these groundskeepers, they're often overworked, underpaid, and very often underappreciated, and it's an amazing opportunity when students get to build bridges with these workers and for the workers to get to feel more a part of the community that they work so hard to keep beautiful. So that's one of my favorite parts about getting to do this work.
Well, you had mentioned that that you had gone to Cuba, and the Cubans even today worship Jose Marti. I think he wrote the words to Guantanamero. I'm not sure about that, but he had an expression about every worker being a student and every student being a worker,
Mm,
which I thought was kind of an interesting phrase. And of course, he was pre-revolutionary Cuba, or Cuba, as they say. So that was kind of interesting. But
mm.
I'm going to leave you the last word, Mackenzie Feldman, proud graduate of both Pudaho and the University of California, Berkeley, and who has spent, her very short years, from my perspective, being an older guy, but doing wonderful work for the environment. So why don't you give us some final words, Mackenzie?
Thank you, Dr. Ackerman. Um, well, if you're listening to this and you are in Hawaii, well, I guess if you're anywhere and you're connected to a school or you have a kid at school, definitely check out, our work, Rewild Your Campus. And if you are interested in kind of helping to get pesticides off of a campus that you care about, reach out to us. And also, specifically in Hawaii, we're trying to get Punahou to do this. They still spray toxic pesticides on the campus, and we're also trying to work with the University of Hawaii system. So, if you're interested in this at all, reach out to me. You can find me on the Rewild Your Campus site. And I just wanted to say thank you, Dr. Ackerman. I think you've always been such a proponent of empowering students and like with Pueo, with you just how you are, and I really appreciate it. And I think it takes mentors and it takes, faculty who kind of show students the way and help them, build connections and all of that. So it really means a lot to be speaking with you on here. And yeah, thank you for always believing in me and cheering me on.
Hey, Well, it's easy to believe in you. You're doing great work, really fantastic work. That's the end of our show today. This is Carl Ackerman, host of Journeys of the Mind, and we are part of ThinkTech Hawaii, which is run and operated by that mensch, Jay Fidel. Hui ho.